All right, greetings everybody. I wanted to provide you with a little more guidance as you write your rough draft of either your literature review or your research brief. So I'm not promising that this is going to be the most entertaining PowerPoint or screencast, but hopefully it'll provide you with a little more guidance. So for either a literature review or a research brief, you need an introductory section material that explains your topic, but also tells your reader why it's important. Why bother doing a literature review about the use of technology in science classrooms or whatever your topic is? And what you want to do is use material from the research to support your explanation of this importance. Why is this important enough for us to take the time to read about it, learn about it, and make changes around it? So if we look at the example, one of the examples I provided, that's loaded up into Folio. This is the research brief. It all starts here, fixing our national writing crisis from the foundation. We scroll down. You'll see the introductory material starts off with what's wrong with our young readers. The news media, blah, 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 starts telling you just how poorly we are as a nation of writers. And he actually includes some charts and tables with data. You don't have to do that, but in a research brief, it's more than acceptable to include charts with data. So you want to, in that introduction, tell them what your explanation of what your topic is and why it's important. Why should I work toward doing this? For a literature review, after you've set up your introduction, what you want to do is prepare your reader for the different research that you're going to review for them. So let's go to another document. Sorry. Here we go. This is from the University of Illinois. They have a website there to support literature review writing, and I thought this was a real good, clear way to get us to think about how to organize a whole bunch of articles that we've read on one topic. So they do the same process that we did, where they make a chart, what they're calling a grid of common points, as you can see here, before they sit down to actually write the paper. And then what they suggest is that we focus on one sort of common point and then think about what the subtopics might be underneath that. So for their example, as you can see, they're using capital punishment. So you want to have some sort of paragraph that at the end of your introduction that will prepare your readers for the body of your literature review. So here it might be something like capital punishment literature on the issue of deterrence has the following subtopics, and then literally they tell you the 3 different areas they're going to look at. So obviously they're organizing their literature review by theme. Now when you get ready to start thinking about, remember we're going to synthesize and analyze, what you want to do at the beginning probably of each sentence is have a sentence that does the synthesis and will get you ready to talk about specific studies in a little more detail. So for their example again, they start with something like, much of the literature points out that while capital punishment does not deter crime, most Americans still believe that it does deter crime. So you can see here the highlighted section is synthesizing the literature and the second section is describing it. Then again you have another example. After a sentence like that does the synthesis and the description, that would be beginning of a paragraph, that's when you draw upon specific studies to support that synthesis claim that you're making. You would say, for example, so-and-so's work on da, 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 da. You get the idea. You move on from there. So your body of your literature review should be analysis and synthesis of the sources you have. We talked about this the last time. You can organize them chronologically, thematically, or methodologically. Because we're doing sort of a mini literature review, the chronological framing more than likely is not going to work, because that's when you look at the history of something over decades. As you're writing, what you want to think about doing is relating the articles to each other. You want to look for patterns that occurred across the articles. That's why sometimes that chart can be helpful, because it's easy to see where patterns are. And also begin to look for what might be missing from the research. Because in your conclusion, when you write a literature review, what you want to do is summarize the major findings from the research, and then also evaluate what exists, pointing out what the gaps are and what we need to learn next if we're going to really understand, let's say, flipped classrooms, or if we're really going to understand how to improve collaboration between general education teachers and special education teachers. These are some of the topics that you guys are working on. Or if we're going to understand the ways in which MDC can be implemented to support students' achievement and growth in mathematics. So that's just a very, very brief synopsis to get you started. I just wanted to also get you to, there is the example of, I'm pulled up here, Our Princess is in Another Castle, which is an example of a literature review on the video games to teach content area instruction. What I've pulled up here is the section that starts, is in the middle of the body of these authors' literature review, and you can see they sort of start with that sort of synthesizing sentence at the top. Video gaming and mathematics is characterized by specialized math games developed within and for controlled studies. And then they go on to say a little more, and then immediately right after that you see by sentence 3 they're talking about a specific study that supports that generalization or that synthesis statement that they made. What they do between each paragraph is equally important, is like they're drawing connections between the studies, like I noted on the PowerPoint slide. So just the use of a word like similarly, Mayo's 2009 study found that he's drawing connections. They are drawing connections between the two. So just wanted to point that out to you. And again, I would recommend that you go look at the literature review that I posted, and also the one that I'm working on. I'm not saying it's not done, it's not perfect. I'm just trying to share, just like you sharing your work with me as it's in progress, I figured I could do the same. So for the research brief, remember your introduction is going to be very similar to the introduction for a literature review. You want to have explain the topic and why it's important, and use evidence from research to support your argument for why this is an important topic. When it comes to the body of your research brief, though, what you're going to be doing is making recommendations for how we can quote-unquote solve or address the problem or the issue based on the research that you read. So in the body of your research brief, you can integrate data charts or other visuals if you like. So if we go back to the writing crisis research brief, which I know is a little hard to see the whole page, I'm sorry. When we scroll down to the body of the paper, so he's still building an argument about why writing matters here. Let's get down to where he's making, you don't have to be this, you don't have to be this thorough because we're doing this in 5 weeks. Okay, here he goes. He's making his recommendations when he has this section that's called Fixing the Foundation, a prescription for future writing success. So now, drawing upon all the research he's read, he's saying one thing we need to do is provide ample time for writing. And he goes on to provide an explanation of that, and as you can see, he's citing lots of research to support his statement that we need to use frequent assessment to inform instruction. And again, he's doing the same thing, that we need to explicitly teach writing skills, so he's got a bunch of recommendations based on all the research that he's read about how we can improve young adolescents and adolescents' writing skills. That's what you want to do. You don't have to use, in this particular case, he's got bold, bulleted sort of statements and then begins with an explanation underneath. You do not have to use that format, right, in a structure that works for you. That's just one example of how you can construct or format the body of your research brief. And then again, for the conclusion, what you want to do at the end is remind your reader why this is so important. And you'll see if you go and read the research brief that's posted about the writing quote-unquote crisis, he comes back to why this really matters so much, summarizes his argument, and then again recommends what do we need to do next. Now that I've laid out all these things that I'm telling you, this needs to happen, that needs to happen, this needs to happen in order to improve writing, this is what I think we need to do in order to make those things happen. So you're like advocating, think of it as writing a persuasive sort of thing. You're taking a stand and calling for change or action in your conclusion of your research brief. Literature review, typically what you're doing, remember, if you don't, you're getting ready to frame another study. So in your implications and conclusions, what you're going to do when it says point out the gaps in the research and areas and issues for future study. In other words, this is what we know. We still have to learn about A, B, C, and my study is going to fill in the gap wherever, fill in the blank, wherever it does. So I hope that those guidelines provide a little bit more structure for you to get started. I know maybe you feel like you're shooting in the dark, but it's a draft. It will not be quote-unquote graded. I will only provide feedback. You submit it on time, you get full credit. So I look forward to reading them later in the week. If you have any questions, just send me an email. Thank you.